Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential freedom through land investing, real estate investing, and entrepreneurship. Hey everyone, this is episode 94 of the Real Estate Investing Podcast, discussing mindset for being a successful entrepreneur. I'm your host, Daniel Apke, joined again by my brother and business partner, Ron Apke. Before we get into the show, let's go over a question from one of our featured members in our free Discord community. The question from Drew is, I have heard a theory that northern states struggle to sell land in the winter, which makes sense. I'm looking to buy in Wisconsin right now. Anyone have experience selling in northern states going into the winter time?
Really good question. I feel like the last, 6 weeks, Daniel, I feel like this has been an insanely hot topic in our community. And I wanted to bring, I don't know if we've talked about it on a podcast, so I wanted to bring that into the podcast. Really good question, Drew. But going into that, it definitely does affect. People aren't going to be out walking land when it's whatever, 15 degrees and there's a foot of snow on the ground. It's not as common. But that being said, if you're trying to target buying land in Wisconsin, you're going to get things cheaper. There's going to be less people trying to list their properties also. So you're going to have a leg up on the sellers that you're mailing. So I think it's I think it's a good thing, honestly, targeting those type of states this time of year. I don't think it's a bad thing. If you price cheap enough on the back end, you're going to still be able to sell land. People are still going to be looking for land, hunting land, all that stuff. But it definitely will slow down because the amount of buyers looking to buy will decrease between November and February.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's one of those things, Ron, it's been such a hot topic because we're in October now. So we're very quickly approaching the winter time, especially in those northern months. I mean, I was watching football yesterday and they were breathing, I can't remember what game it was, maybe Green Bay or somewhere up north. And they were breathing hard and there's actually like cold, what do you call it? Coming from their mouths. You could see I'm trying to think. I'm going blank on what am I thinking of? The cold air coming from their mouth, so you can see it
Yeah, I know what
coming.
you're talking about. Yeah, everyone knows what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So I saw that and I was like, wow, it is quickly approaching. It's only October, but I think going forward, like we got to keep a really close eye on this. Ron and I, to be honest, have not done a ton of work up in those northern Michigan, Wisconsin states. A lot of our members do. So I'm curious to hear more about some other people's opinions on this. I'm sure there's a lot of people who know, but I would definitely expect it to sell down on the sell side. Like Ron said, though, acquisition should be a little bit easier that time of year, but the sales side should be a little harder. There's always going to be a market, like we say, for underpriced land or land that's priced accordingly if you did your research on the upfront county selection aspect, Ron. But let's get into the show. Mindset for being a successful entrepreneur. And in segment one, Ron, I want to talk about where we came from because I feel like we're not far removed from our 9 to 5s. Like it hasn't been 20 years since we haven't had 9 to 5, since we hadn't had any money, since we hadn't had college debt and different things that all of our members come to us for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this is going to be a very valuable episode for everyone because they're not that far off from being a really successful entrepreneur, but there's going to be roadblocks. And a lot of it just comes down to mindset, comes down to grit and everything like that. But it wasn't like when Daniel and I first started investing in land, and we've been trying to do businesses. We tried to flip things. We had what was it, Daniel? It was like a county auction site that we were buying like random household goods for pennies on the dollar, and everything was always broken. We were trying to post it on eBay, and we were a lot of things we were doing then was trading our time for money. I don't feel like we're doing that anymore as entrepreneurs because the scalability of what land is. But in terms of mindset, like where I've come from, Daniel, just in the last like 3-4 years, from not having any employees to now having a full staff, that was one of my biggest struggles. I don't know for you personally, Daniel, I'm interested to hear, but as far as like paying someone 40, 50, 80, $120,000 a year was a really hard mental hurdle for me. And it's something I'm obviously happy I got over. And I think you helped me with that. But was that ever an issue for you, Daniel, as far as hiring out like an American employee? Like hiring a VA is obviously cheaper investment, but hiring a full-time American W-2 employee.
I think our first one was a little bit scary, but it's one of those things like, if you want to scale, you have to do it. So what's holding you back? Your fear. And when you can analyze that, it's your fear that's irrational, then you can push yourself through it. And I kind of just got over that because I know it needed to happen. And I always like to live by the philosophy doing the scary things, because I just think that's so important. Because obviously a lot of the success that you guys will have in entrepreneurship is not from staying in your comfort zone. And I like to live by the mentality, do the scary things, do the hard things, push through them. And that's one of those things where you know you need an employee to grow. So what's holding you back from getting an employee? We looked at our financials, we could afford one. There's really nothing that's holding us back except ourselves. So at that point I just kind of pushed through it. And I mean, there's fear of things that come up all the time, I think, Ron, and it's just understanding if it's rational or irrational.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know, 3 years ago, whatever, I lost a lot more sleep at night over deals, over stuff like that. Like, I do not do that anymore just because I everything I do currently is just it's a bigger picture mindset. Like, yeah, ideally, we don't buy bad properties that have a very slim profit margin or that have some defect, but I'm not gonna lose sleep at night over that. Things are going to work themselves out. I'm going to learn from the experiences. So that's been a huge thing for me. Like there is obviously fear in big decisions and things like that, but in terms of like letting it's little like one deal and how many deals we're doing every year, even anyone watching here, one deal in the grand scheme of things, if you're trying to make it big in this business, isn't a huge thing. But I used to lose like I'm sure you did too, and over littler things that like you wouldn't lose a minute of sleep over right now. That's really changed over me. Even if it's like a 50, like we have a bad $50,000 property that we bought for sale right now. I don't really think about it much. I know it's going to sell for 60, 65, something like that. It's going to be a poor margin, but it's just little things like that don't really affect me as much.
And I think that all goes back to this segment where we came from. We didn't have 100 deals in our pipeline. We were losing sleep because we were a lot smaller. We are a lot more in the weeds. We didn't have employees yet. Each deal kind of mattered more to us. It felt like it mattered more to us. In the grand scheme of things, zoom out a few levels, and it really doesn't matter. But it's all because we at the time we were doing that run, we had 9 to 5 jobs. We were struggling financially. Like, where did we come from? That's what this segment's about. We had 9 to 5 jobs. I was an outside salesman. Ron was a basketball coach. We wanted to get out of those jobs. It was our goal to get out of those jobs. We were struggling financially, just like most people in here, and not struggling like we could pay our rent and stuff, Ron. And I had a little savings and we were buying some rental properties, but we weren't living lavishly. We weren't, buying a bunch of fancy stuff. We were still in debt. We weren't like by any means well off. So we were in the same position as 95% of you. So I just wanted to get that point across, Ron. And we didn't get any help from family in terms of getting capital to start a business or anything like that. Like it was all up to us. We are just like anyone else out there that started, anyone that's listening to this that didn't come from much, didn't have a like, didn't, wasn't gifted a bunch of money to start a business or anything. We came from working 9 to 5s and hardworking, whatever, not blue collar, but hardworking Americans just trying to pay our bills and whatever.
Yeah, and I know I sold a bunch of stock to get all this started, to pay for some of our land, to pay for some of our, which a financial advisor is not going to tell us to do that, not going to tell us to sell that stock or whatever. But that's just not how we were wired, I don't think, as far as, but yeah, it wasn't like, definitely wasn't easy at the beginning. It never was. And we had the same concerns about everything that everyone else has. You question things, but you just got to fight through it. But that's a good point, Daniel. Like, yeah, it wasn't at the beginning, it wasn't easy. And when you have a potential $10,000 profit deal that you lose, like, yeah, naturally, you're probably that you could potentially lose when it might be your only deal that week or only deal that month. You're going to lose a little bit of sleep over that for sure, because you're trying to figure out how to pay for the next mail, whatever it is. But getting over that hump is so incredible. That feeling, I remember that pretty well, Dana, when we're like, okay, we can take a breath here. Wait, one deal doesn't determine us. 10 deals don't make or break us. I remember that pretty well. Just that feeling of, I guess, just a weight off my shoulder, I think is what it was. But you're still trying to grind and grow.
It's because when you keep pushing yourself forward, whatever it is, even once you have, say, you go from having $3,000 in the bank to $500,000 in the bank. And yes, you're more financially free. You can probably sit on the couch and be a little bit lazy. But I feel like it's just as important to keep yourself out of your comfort zone as much as if you want to grow. even when you have that $500,000, it's just as important as when you have that $3,000 to really push yourself forward. And the more you're pushing yourself out of that comfort zone early on, the more it's going to get easier to be comfortable in those uncomfortable situations. It's you got to consistently grow. You have to keep pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Like for me, we to be honest, we don't need to put work in every single day, but we have goals and vision, Ron, for what we want to do and what we want to achieve that push us forward. And I just think I've been listening to a lot of stoicism, Ron, and it's the whole philosophy of just putting yourself in your putting yourself in uncomfortable situations creates more happiness in the end. Being lazy creates more discomfort in the end. Being lazy is harder than not being lazy. And I've been seeing that over and over again. It's like, yeah, it might sound easy to be lazy, but then, what comes with that? Oh, you're going to get overweight. Yeah, it might be easy to eat food and stay on your couch, but what happens when you're overweight? Oh, you got to go to the doctors more. Oh, you get sick more. Oh, you have less energy. It's looking at the long picture, I think, more and what your ultimate goals and vision is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think in like our community and the people who listen to this podcast are entrepreneurship focused. And I think in the community in general, entrepreneurship community, I think so many people or so many influencers, whatever you want to call them, talk so much about like where they are now. And I think that past of where they came from, the struggles and the hard times is just as important, because there are always hard times before like, and we're not comfortable with where we are right now, like that we see something, a greener pasture ahead, and just there's always going to be something we're working towards, like Daniel was talking about. But I think I think this is good to talk about, Daniel, and kind of open up and go into those struggles that like there's a ton of roadblocks we had.
Do you want to get specifically into roadblocks, or what do you want to, where are you trying to go?
Let's get on a segment. Let's get on the segment two. I think that was good, and we'll talk more about that as we get on. And we
Segment
obvious.
two.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, segment two is just mindset we see from other successful investors. So, like Ron was just saying, you're going to hit roadblocks. What kind of mindset gets over those humps and those roadblocks? Those, I like to call them breaking points, because it's when people go and run in the corner or people stand out, push through the roadblock and get to the other side.
What did Wayne say last week? He said he had a coach talking to him, and he's sorry guys. He said he had a coach talking to him, and the coach said like a lot of people come to him and like say, what if it doesn't work? And Wayne's kind of philosophy in investing in real estate, investing in all this has been, well, what if it does work? And like that's the thing, like that's the thing successful people have, I think, and the mindsets I see, like they're looking at not why does land investing not work? Why could land investing be too saturated here in the next 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, 5 years, whatever you think? And why are you people who question things opposed to people who are just trying to figure it out and figure out the answers? There are people making money in every single industry in the world. Find out how to do that as well. And I think just finding a way to make things work is an extremely important attribute for successful people, entrepreneurs in general.
Yeah, it's almost like the whole blame philosophy. It's not external factors that are going to prevent you from succeeding. And in some cases, if you're a startup or whatever, or you're doing business in Ukraine and Russia attacks you, yes, there are those external situations that are very extreme and rare. But 95, 99% of the time, it's going to be internal forces that are stopping yourself. And that's kind of what Wayne was hinting at. Like, it's not the business model, or it's not whatever the situation is, it's yourself that's stopping you. And some people are gifted, in going back to stoicism, some people are gifted easier lives than others, and it makes you have to work a little bit harder, but everyone at the end has the same opportunity. One person might just have to put a little more work, effort, and consistency and time into it than someone who's gifted $100 million at birth. So just going back to that point, Ron, it's not external forces, it's internal forces that are stopping people. And the mindset that we see from successful investors understand that, and they're willing to do just about anything to make it work because they know it's nothing but them fighting it.
Yeah, and those people who did have whether rougher upbringing, just not handed as much, whatever it is, those people who make it successful from there become uber successful because what they've been through, and the hard things now don't seem like anything compared to where they were in the past. Um, Another thing I'm constantly seeing from successful investors is just that growth mindset, Daniel. Like they're constantly looking to grow, they're constantly looking to learn, they're not complacent. They understand that things change in markets, that just strategies are going to change, and they're looking to grow and adjust with things opposed to just kind of being stagnant.
Exactly. Willing to test things out. And it goes back to the fear, pushing through fear, because it is easy to be comfortable. Oh, sending out mail is working for you, or buying properties through your realtor in a market to get your rental properties, whatever your guys' situation are. It gets comfortable, right? But if you stay too comfortable for too long, the market's going to take advantage and the market's going to pass you. You have to be constantly looking to grow, looking at ways to improve, looking at alternative methods to do things. That stuff's uncomfortable, especially. It's like, I'm trying to think of an example, Ron, but I've heard it so many times, like old business owners in cities who have just been doing it that way. It's always worked when we've done it this way. This is the only way we do it. It's the right way to do it. And then the other innovative competitor, fresh-minded competitor comes in, takes the market share, and it's too late. So you have to be willing to adapt. I think that's a big part of it.
Without a doubt, like, yeah, if you don't adapt, like, yeah, maybe your business will be successful for 2 3 years, but like that's like Blockbuster not adapting. That's like Kmart not adapt. Like all Sears not adapting. All these giant companies that went out of business fast because someone just made life easier. Someone created Netflix, where you can just click on your TV and watch from there, or it started as being delivered, I believe. But one more thing I want to touch base on from successful people, I'm constantly seeing it, is they have a mission behind what they're doing. Some people, it's as simple as being able to be home with their kids. Like their mission is like, I want to be able to work from home. I want to be able to travel. I want to be able to take 3 vacations a year. I want to see my kids more. And that mission pushes them towards being extremely successful in entrepreneurship. Other missions, our mission as a whole for Daniel and I is creating freedom, whether it's for us, for our students, for our buyers and sellers of land that we work with. It's creating freedom, and having that mission. The first year, 2 years, Daniel, you can grind off of like just adrenaline almost. It's like almost the first quarter of a game, like when you get adrenaline. But year 20, year 25, like that's going to be pushed 15, 10 years. That's going to be based on a mission and having something bigger than yourself. And I think that's what's going to make businesses last much longer than just 5 years, 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, if you don't have a purpose or a reason for doing things, you'll eventually get burned out. And that can be okay because you can make money getting burned out, hopefully, and then go pursue your passion. And I talk a lot about that, getting to your freedom before getting to your purpose. Like for some people, this could be a means to an end. They need the money, they're financially locked. It's a lot worse being in that survival mode, financially locked, Ron, than that level 3 that we talk about, the freedom mode, to where you have the money. But what's your purpose? Why are you making this money? What do you want to do with it? You got to find your passion. You will get burned out if you don't find your purpose, your why. Behind me, if you guys are watching on YouTube, there's a book called Start with Why. I would read that. Highly recommend reading that if you guys are kind of lost in what you want to do in life or don't have really much drive or passion or just don't know in general. It's a really really good book just going on all the greats like the Steve Jobs of the world, the Reed Hastings, Ron, who's the Netflix founder. He dives really deep into all these stories and why they succeeded because they had this purpose and this vision and in their why, their purpose to drive them forward. And Steve Jobs wanted to enable the ordinary person. And no one could do that before. No one had computers or technology to just create a business. And he wanted to enable the individual to be able to compete and be able to have businesses and whatever that was, because it was very difficult to do back then.
Yeah, it's crazy. And yeah, he ended up creating obviously the product that is sold more than any product in the history of mankind with the iPhone. But let's get into that third segment, Daniel. I think we had things we see people struggle with, like mindsets, struggling mindsets, people who, I don't like saying failed entrepreneur. I don't think that's the right term, but mindsets we see from people who might struggle in this business or struggle as a real estate investor.
Yeah, mindset from people who we see are failing is this segment. So it comes down to just the opposite things of what we talked about, Ron. We talked about consistency and grit. And if you're not willing to push through the obstacles, it's that simple. Like you do not need to be that smart. You really do not. You don't need any skills. You need attributes. And that's another book behind me, The Attributes, 25 Attributes, something by Rich Divine, or yeah, by Rich Divine, I think. He talks about attributes over skills all day. He was a Navy SEAL. He goes into great details. Another great book. But it comes down to that mindset, Ron. Are you willing to push through it? Do you have the grit to get through the hard times? Are you going, or are you going to curl up in the corner and run away when times get hard and you're struggling financially and you have to put more money to mail or find that, like, figure a way how to push forward through those tough times, because they will happen. That's the reason people fail. I talked to someone today. I told him, if you stay consistent in land investing for 6 months, we have not seen one person fail that stayed consistent that long. Not one. And I told him I promised that we have not. And if they were, they'd be the first, but we have never seen it before. In 6 months of consistency, what happens, people get to month one, month two, and something happens, times get hard, they get scared, their dopamine lowers because they had a dopamine rush when they purchased their course or whatever it was. But that's when we see people fail, Ron.
Yeah, I think it's almost that adrenaline again. Like you have adrenaline when you start, you're excited. And for us guys, and if you've been listening this long and you don't, for us, we send direct mail to acquire under market land, under market value land. And people who send one mailer or one set of mailers, which could be 1,500 mailers, and they don't get a deal, they just like, this doesn't work. And having that mindset, I think the majority of the thing is like people just find an excuse. Like I think excuses in general are a huge thing of failed entrepreneurs, whether it's like, oh, the land doesn't work. It's too saturated. It's whatever, the recession, there's a recession. We can't do this. And there's always a reason why they're not doing something, and never the reason just to move forward and to make it happen. There are hundreds, thousands of people making 500,000 plus in land every single year, probably more than that, but there's just so many people doing it. You can be another person doing it without a doubt. But the excuse mindset, I think, is what I see so common. That's pretty much it, Dan. Honestly, excuses, like that's when you first know, like when they start making excuses or start blaming other people for things not working.
Yeah. Just goes back to, like we said, Ron, those external, blaming things on external forces when it's all internally. And I understand it. Like, everyone makes excuses in their head. I make it every day. And you just have to understand that voice that's talking in your head and what it's doing. And like David Goggins does, he calls it the bitch voice, and everyone else has a little word for it. But it starts talking, you have to understand it. Like today, for example, I went to the ice bath, I went to the sauna, and I'm planning to go to jiu-jitsu at 6:15. I got home from the ice bath and sauna, and I was making all these excuses in my head why I don't need to go to jiu-jitsu. Oh, I'm going tomorrow morning. I want to give my body rest. And I could hear myself telling myself that, and I was believing it too. And I was about to wrap it up, and I realized, because I listened to a good podcast earlier, that that's just that voice trying to make excuses why not to do things. So it's okay to have excuses in your head, but you got to overcome those excuses. You got to shut them up, or whatever it is. You got to find a way to keep moving forward. You're never going to find a way to just silence your mind. Your mind's always going to speak. You try to silence your mind, it's going to come back louder. You just have to understand that it's just thoughts, I feel like, Ron.
And I think a lot of people, when they're like in a 9 to 5 and they're trying to transition to entrepreneurship or trying to start that over, like they just like, oh, my 9 to 5 is not that bad. I'm just going to rely on this. This isn't that bad. So they rely on something. And for us, like I quit my shit. Like I went straight full on in this, and there wasn't another option. Like this was going to work. And that like survival mode, I think really help both of us, honestly. But yeah, just like having that to fall back on, like having that reasoning in their head, like, this will be fine. 9 to 5 for 30 years isn't that bad. And just having that to fall back on. I'm not saying just quit your job, guys. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying from a mindset perspective, that's what I see. And if you hear that, that's just the bitch in your head kind of saying that, like Daniel talked about, like Goggins talks about. But overcoming that is easier said than done.
It is. It's hard, and it's something you'll work on for life. That's one of those things. If you don't have that going on in your head, get yourself in more uncomfortable positions, because that's when you're growing, when you have that. But when you push through and stick to your original promises, is what they say, how you build your confidence, right? You get over those excuses, you get over those hurdles, you stick to your word, you stick to your original plan, and that's how you build self-confidence. But that's all I have, Ron.
Yep. I think that was really good, guys. If you guys aren't in our Discord yet, ask questions in there, join our Discord, ask questions in there. But hopefully that was really helpful, Dan. I like that.
Our Discord, landinvestingonline.com/Discord. It's completely free. Join in, ask any questions you have. Ron and I are involved, and a ton of other successful entrepreneurs. Please like and subscribe to Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or whatever you guys are listening on. If you got any value, we do not do any ads on this, so it really means a lot to get those reviews back from you. Other than that, thank you for joining, and we'll see you next episode.
Thanks, guys.